Tonight I'm with a gentleman called David Lloyd. Everybody knows him throughout cricket, through various guises: player, commentator, umpire. I've probably forgot a few other things, but we're here to talk not about cricket tonight, but about football. David's football life. So thanks for joining me, Dave.
Yeah, looking forward to it as well. It'll be all things Accrington, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, we can digress to a few other areas, but first and foremost, what does football mean to you then?
Well, football's my sport, and I've been incredibly lucky to play cricket and be involved in cricket all my life since 15 or 16. But I always say that's my business. That's what I do. That's how I earn a living. But my sport is football. I'm just probably like many people, men and women, that I'm just a football fanatic, and like I watch it anywhere. I watch any match, and I'm like everybody else as well. Is it on BT? Is it on ITV? Is it on BBC? Is it on Amazon? Is it on Sky? Where the hell is it? It's real adventure finding where actually a game is.
So first kicking a ball. I know you were a pupil of Peel Park like myself. So where were your first memories of getting into football?
Well, my dad ran a football team called Cedar Swiss in the combination, in Accrington combination. And you probably don't know that I'm an only child. And my mother would never short to telling me that she actually wanted a girl. And she wanted a girl, and they were going to call the girl Gwyneth, but I came along, so they called me the same name as my dad, David. And my dad ran this football team, but my mother, for a number of years, dressed me as a girl. I had dresses on and long hair and trestles. But Dad used to take me to football, and I played football and played alongside all the guys who were in Cedar Swiss football team, and then progressed to Cambridge Street Methodists and played for Stanley when the demise of Accrington Stanley went out the league. I played for Rosendale United. I played maybe a couple of times for Great Harwood. I was at Burnley as well under Jimmy McElroy for a little while and training at Gawthorpe. But cricket had took over by then, and I knew exactly where I was going.
Yeah, so just going back to your Peel Park days, what intrigued me, I obviously went to Peel Park with Graham as well. We actually played football on the pitch, on the Peel Park pitch, because they'd gone bust by then. Where were you playing around that time for school? And
yeah, we played,
right, okay.
Played Iamses, and we would be walked across. They all have IVs on now. No, we just went across in twos, across Burnley Road, over the railway bridge into Iamses, and we played there. And we had a lovely teacher called Mr. Wade. I think he was called Jack Wade, who was a churchgoer like my dad. So they were good pals. But we had a season which I've still got sort of papers of it, and my dad kept all scrapbooks. But we went all season and scored 64 goals and didn't have any goals against. And the headmaster, Mr. Hinchcliffe, was really excited about this, that they played all season and we didn't have a goal against.
No, great school. And I remember cricket nets as well in the hall. I mean, like some of them from a grammar school, really, weren't it? Fantastic school.
Yeah. And you've just reminded me, they had cricket nets in which were well used. Pie jingle.
Yeah.
They were well used. Yeah.
Yeah. So going on to your next step of your career, then you've got to decide if you're into, if you're going football or cricket. Was it a real possibility, becoming a footballer, professional footballer? Because I know you played at a good level.
Cricket had taken over. I was at 15, 16. I was quite a timid lad. I was quite small as well. I was one of these that I got to 17, 18 and then shot up. But prior to that, I was quite small, and I'd get knocked about a bit. And although I had a bit of skill and playing combination stuff at a young age, I was getting knocked around. Don't forget, this is like in the 60s, and anything goes. And I know I played, our good pals with the Bramwells. You know the Bramwells on the fish market?
Yeah.
Steve and John. I mean, they were brutes on a football pitch, them two. Good grief. And I played against them, and we were on King George's, and the top two pitches were sort of near to each other. Anyway, Steve come sliding in at me, and he kicked me from one pitch onto the other. I finished up on the other pitch. And he picked me up and he said, "I'm sorry, Dave, it's just a bit of business."
Yeah. It was bordering on violence, really, wasn't it?
Oh,
when you think
I
about
mean,
it.
but there were no. It's funny that you mentioned that violence. There were never any. There were no fisticuffs or anything like that. There were. You get sawn off at the knees or on the hips, but there were never any real malice. It was just the way that football was. That you could fly in through the back. It didn't matter, and you could charge the goalie. You could knock him in the back of the nets and all.
Yeah, oh, definitely. So you obviously you're playing for Lancashire, you're making a career, but you're still going back and playing football, aren't you? For Accrington at that time.
Yeah, because it was just a summer job. We were right in the early days at cricket. We were just paid during the summer, and we always used to say as players we're summer millionaires and winter paupers. So you had to get a job in winter, which was, I chuckle when people say that present day cricketers are fitter than what they used to be. I was loading beer wagons at 6 o'clock in the morning, all winter. You've got to be flipping fit to do that. And another time, I worked for ATS Tyres, Associated Tyres at Burnley. Changing tyres in an open bay throughout winter, 6 o'clock in the morning. You've got to be fit to do that. And so, we would always report back at Old Trafford on April 1st and train and practice for a month and then start playing.
Yeah, and there were a bit more of a crossover at that time between people playing different sports, weren't there? Johnny Burstow's dad played professional football, didn't he?
Yeah, well, I were big mates with David. And of course, Jim, it's a great quiz question. Which Lancashire cricketers, 2 Lancashire cricketers, played in Wembley Cup finals? 2 Lancashire senior cricketers played in Wembley Cup finals. That's it. Darren, should we just leave that for a while?
Yeah,
be bubbling over and see if people could come up with it.
Definitely, yeah. No, that's it's intrigued me. I know my stuff, but that's it's got me.
Yeah,
definitely.
2 Wembley finals, and I'll give you the one of them's a League Cup final, and the other's an FA Cup final. What about that?
Wow. Yeah. Right. I've got some ideas, but I won't spoil it. I'll put it out there on social media.
Yeah. Right.
Great stuff. So coming back to Accrington Stanley, then a little bit of watching them as a supporter and going up to Peel Park in the day. What are your first memories of that, David?
Sitting on the doorstep at Water Street where we lived, and the Stanley players who were in the hostel. There was like a hostel in Avenue Parade, and my Auntie Edith was the housekeeper. She would do the washing and all that business and keep it clean. And so the players would come past our house on either the way to training or the way to matches, the ones that were staying in the hostel. And so that was the early memory. And then again, Peel Park, where it is the car park now, the players, Stanley players used to train on there. It was cinders. It was just a cinder area with a slope. And it was our playing area. As locals in that area, we used to play there on that wreck. And I also recall there were 3 air raid shelters. There were 3 air raid shelters there that, you'd see lads, and I've never been a smoker, but lads would go down there having a smoke, like behind the bike sheds, but they go down into these 3 air raid shelters. So the hub of playing sport, either football or cricket, was what is now the Peel Park car park, but the players would also play. And you'll know, Darren, there's an iconic picture when Stanley were either going or just going out, and some little lads kicking a ball against a wall, and one of them's in a starship like that. I think that lad's surname Pickup, and they lived at the top of Sultan Street. And I can't remember, his brother was Anthony Pickup, and I think that's his younger brother, but I can't recall his name. But I think that's an iconic picture of this lad. He's got a school cap on and a pair of just a school shorts, and he's in the goals.
Yeah, and they had some terrific players at that time, didn't they? All Scottish.
And Walter Galbraith was the manager, and lots of the lads, the players, stayed in the area when they'd finished playing. There's so many of them stayed down in Accrington and had businesses and good businesses. And so I used to be able to recite the team off. And the other thing, that there were no advertising boards of such. And so, because you'd be so small and standing behind the wall, your dad used to hand you over the wall and you'd sit at the other side of the wall. And this ball would come peppering at you at all times. But if you stayed on the stand side, there'd be bricks around, house bricks, that you'd stand on so that you could get a better view. So there were bricks, loose bricks on the floor that you'd just make a little pile, stand up on them so that you got a better view.
Unbelievable. And then the demise, I mean, what it meant for the town of Accrington. It took a long time to recover, didn't it, David?
Yeah, it did. So in 1962, and there were two councillors, Councillor Bill Parkinson, who Alan and Jimmy, I've seen Alan and Jimmy Parkinson up at the Stanley, and Alderman Walwork, who was Susan, my first wife's dad. And they, tried to get some financial assistance, but there was a real apathy in the town towards the club. The gates were less than 1,000, and interest had waned, and the board of directors were unable to finance the club. And the rest is history. When they went, and Bob Lloyd might probably quite possibly have pulled the plug on Stanley, who was the chairman at Burnley Football Club. And it seemed that the debt would be about £60,000, and so the club folded. It was a terrible time, awful time.
And when you think of so many football fans in the area, but obviously they were all watching Blackburn and Burnley, etc. I noticed that there was a charity match, I think that same year, within the 12 months, and there were like 7,000 there. Tommy Steele played in it, and so it showed football was still loved in the area, wasn't it?
Yeah, they must have been, supporters must have been really fickle, because I do vividly recall that Gates just went to nothing. Yeah. And the team, you knew that all the publicity in the Observer was negative, that there's no money, there's no investment, the place is dropping to bits, and they were unable, nobody was able to stop it. And of course, money was real tight at that time, interest rates and inflation. I know we've got problems now, but crikey, at that time it was rife, and unemployment. And so all these things brought about a perfect storm, and the club went out of existence.
Yeah, and obviously Stanley regrouped, got back in the Football League eventually. And then you were also asked to get involved, weren't you, a few years after the Football League days? Hit some hard times. Ilias Khan got involved in this. So how did that all work out, David?
Well, just me being a supporter, and Ilias took over. Ilias it reminded me that when I went back to play at Accrington, I ran some coaching sessions down at the sports centre, and we had to pay for the nets. The club would pay for the nets, and I was charging the lads, or we were charging the lads, I think it was 50p or £1. It might have probably 50p to come and use the nets, practice cricket, bit of coaching and so on. And Ilias said that he stood outside and didn't have the 50p, and I brought him in. I said, "It's fine, come in. You're okay, come in." That's why he got slightly investing in Accrington Cricket and Football Club, because he helped us out. He was Mr. X for a long time. The cricket club was on its knees, and with Peter West as chairman, and Peter Barrett and myself, we sort of put a finance, but we put some money in. But there was Mr. X, and Mr. X was actually Ilias, who gave us a bit of money because I'd let him into these coaching sessions. But yeah, I mean, I never knew when we got back. When I went back and I was a supporter, and I always liked going behind the goals. I didn't like, sitting at the halfway line with what you'd say other directors, because they talk all the time for a start. I just want to watch the match. And so I like going behind the goals. And I never really knew whether I was a director or not, until Mark Turner rang me and said we got a problem that we're about to start the season and we've no CCTV and we can't start unless we've got CCTV. To cut a long story short, I had to pay for that. And it were a substantial, it were a few £1,000, so I fronted up.
I can imagine.
And so skipping on, Andy Holt comes in. Andy comes in and takes over the club and so on. And you know what Andy's like. I mean, he makes me sound like Prince Charles. And he said, I've got something to tell you. I said, what? Go on, what? He said, I'm going to have to sack you as a director. I'm really sorry. I said, that's the best news I've had for years. He said, no, it's just having, like, I've got an accountant and a lawyer and so on. We're just streamlining the board, but there'll be a place for the old director. I said, Andy, it's the best news I've ever had. And then when he did a little thing at the cricket club, he said, I think I'm the only bloke that's ever sacked him. And I said, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. It cost me a fortune. Yeah.
No, he's done a brilliant job as well, hasn't he? Well,
absolutely fantastic. I mean, and when you remember that when Mike Chapman turned up, I think it was Mike Chapman, and we were on BBC TV before the match, and Andy's on, he just walked off. He saw somebody, and he just walked away, gave somebody his microphone, and went to somebody else. He's supposed to be being interviewed.
Yeah, there's always a touch of Phoenix Nights about Stanley, isn't there? There's always something going off.
It is, and there should be. There should be.
Yeah.
Many people, I know we talk about what's your sport. Well, I know people all over the country who support different teams, and they're always on to me. That is the best afternoon. They turn up. This last week, Derby County, got a mate called Andy Mitchell who runs sports stores. He's got a few, and around Derby area. He's a fantastic bloke. And he said, "Are you going to the game?" Well, I can't go because I can't travel. And so I put him in touch with Andy. I said, you got to go meet Andy and tell him I've sent you. And then I got in touch with Andy. He said, oh, I'm with that bloke. Is he called Perry from EFL? He said, just tell your mate to interrupt and just come in. Well, I've got pictures of my mate Andy Mitchell and Andy Holt with their arms around each other and a pint each. One's Derby County, one's Accrington. And Mitch rings me when he gets back home and he said, that's the best afternoon I've ever had at a football match.
Yeah, there's so many people say the same thing. They can't all be wrong, can they?
No, I think when he meets them and gives them a pie, he does that sometimes, doesn't he? If the supporters have come a long way, people can't believe it. I mean, I live probably 7 minutes from York City's new stadium, and my wife is from York, and she's always been a supporter. So we go down there from time to time and watch. And the experience is light years away from what it is at Stanley. Light years. Yeah. And that's National League. And it's not they won't like me saying this, but it's not a great experience. It's not uplifting. You don't go and think, win, lose, or draw. What an afternoon I've had. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, there's something cold about those new grounds, isn't there? The fantastic setup and great facilities, but it's that atmosphere. You just can't buy it, can you?
No, and it's an all-seater, so you can imagine the spectators, they want to stand. And they go behind the goals and they sit. They have the seat. You've got to have an allocated seat as well, and you have to sit in this seat, and then somebody behind telling you the life story of what they're going for the dinner and one thing and another. But they want to stand up, and I think that's a big asset in UK football if you are able to stand and watch.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that I was going to ask you intrigued me. So you're at Lancashire in the late 60s. Football in Manchester's booming at that time. City were going well. United, obviously, they got some best players in the world. Yeah. Did you get to watch any football around that time and meet any of those guys, David?
You met all of them. You won't believe it that this day and age, I assume that you don't get near to footballers. And, it's come on at a hell of a pace. And so many world-class foreign players are now playing in the Premier League. But at that time, Law, Charlton and Bess, absolutely. Nobby Stiles, Bill Fawkes, and then come look closer to home, Blackburn and Burnley, Keith Newton, Fred Pickering, Ronnie Clayton, you know Martin Dobson, Colin Waldron, Alan Stevenson, Winger, oh dear, Leighton James, Willie Morgan. We were mixing with them all the time. And I mean, Bestie, George Best. I mean, I played football with George Best. You won't believe it. I played with him in a charity game at Blackpool. And I'm sat there, and we had a manager. I can't remember who it was. And I just said to him, "What position am I?" He said, "If you ever get it, just give it George." That's probably, when you get it, just give it to George. All right, okay. And you're right. Remember Matt Busby? Met Matt Busby loads of time. Tommy Docherty. I thought I almost lived with Tommy Docherty during the winter, speaking at dinners and so on. And so I went with Bobby Charlton to the British Open, me and him. Dennis Law, loads of times, been speaking with him. So we were mixing with him. Dave Sexton, you remember Dave Sexton? Wilf McGuinness took over. Wilf McGuinness took over from Matt. So I just a mate. And so Dave Sexton come from Chelsea, I think it was Chelsea, and took over. Cricket daft, cricket mad. And he said, "Do you want to come across?" And we sat in the dressing room. And they're going out in half an hour, Man United. And I think that I'd be with David probably, because Jose used to like going to United. And so that was a totally different era where the players were so accessible. So accessible. You know, nobody come and sit on the stand and watch the cricket. Just sit there.
Yeah. Would you get many footballers doing the other trip then, coming and watching a game at Old Trafford?
You would do. I mean, the Nevilles are looking present day, Gary and Philip Neville. I've seen, who is it? Scalzi would turn up from time to time. I haven't seen him for ages, Scalzi. I haven't seen him on telly or anything. I know what he's doing. But, you know, the different eras, and I marvel at that. You know, I mean, the pitches now, you'll go back to pitches at that time used to get slutched up and mud and all sorts. And the goalie had a trouble to find the halfway line kicking it, but now they can kick it from one end to another.
Yeah. So what about football these days? So do you still have a watcher of football on TV, etc.?
Absolutely love it.
Yeah, I do.
The skill and the intricacies and the drills of what they're doing. I think it's like a science now, and I think it's a better game so that you can't clog them from behind. You can't clatter through them and get him out of the game. Fantastic. I got a fantastic. You won't remember. The bloke played for England and Bolton Wanderers called Tommy Banks, an absolute guerrilla footballer, local bloke, Tommy.
We're a fullback, I think. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, what a clogger, Tommy. And he's playing for England, and I think it was Walter Winterbottom is the manager. And Walter Winterbottom said, "We're playing against this, he's a flying winger called Garincha." So I assume he's either Brazil, he must be Brazil, Garincha, brilliant world-class player. He said, "I want you to play, Tommy, I want you to pay close attention to this winger, Garincha, and put him out of the game." To which Tommy said, "Do you mean for tonight or forever?"
Yeah, and it did happen, didn't it? They did put people out forever.
Yeah, and so Roy Hartle, I worked with Roy Hartle at the brewery. Roy Hartle was the right back for Bolton Wanderers, and he was at Whitbread's Brewery, which it took over Dutton's Brewery in Blackburn. Whitbread's took over, and he was a director. Roy Hartle was the director of the brewery, and he was right back, and Tommy Banks was left back, and Roy was right well spoken. And Tommy, when they played Stanley Matthews and Tom Finney, Tommy Banks used to shout across to him, "Roy, when you've finished with him, kick him over here."
I mean, I think that's the only thing that's gone out of it now, a little bit of the physical contact. But like you said, it's a better game, isn't it? And you think you've seen it all, and then this lad turns up at Man City and he's like something else, isn't he?
Yeah. I mean, they had Aguero before that, and they're in a position financially to buy the best player in the world. But again, you need to be managed, and that's always an intrigue when a manager is dealing with people on £500,000 a week to deal with that person on a daily basis and manage him and be his boss. Now that is a real intrigue, and so that permeates all the way down to Accrington Stanley. The same thing with John Coleman and Jimmy Bell, dealing with players. Now, I assume that these lads at Stanley are ambitious, real ambitious, that they want to better themselves. And we are a great stepping stone if they're good enough. If they are good enough, we give them a wonderful opportunity. But, I was so disappointed with that lad, Dion Charles, who looked a decent player, who down tools. He just down tools. And, what are you doing, lad? I'd love to have had 5 minutes with you. What are you doing? Because your career is only 10 or 12 years, tops. You're playing football. You've got to do it. You've got to do the job. You've got to play.
Yeah.
What's he doing?
And he's the other lad, strike partner, Colby Bishop, got his head down and he got his big move to Portsmouth eventually anyway, didn't he? So, and kept his reputation intact. So it's just what you've got to do, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And of course, he got moved on. And if he'd have stayed, we'd have got nothing for him. And he wasn't going to sign his contract, so get a bob or two for him, sell him on.
Yeah, and it's the way forward. It's the business model, and everybody knows. So, that's the only way you can go in football at lower level, isn't it? That's no other options.
Yeah, it'd be great to, I'm intrigued on that side of it from what I did coaching to go one-to-one with a player. I want to know what your ambitions are. And so then he'll say, I want to do this. So then your killer question is, and how are you going to achieve it? That's the killer question. So that's your ambition. How are you going to achieve it? And you write it down and you revisit it in 3 months. Right, how are we doing? How are we doing now? Now, you've not done that, have you? And so you can pull them from what they've written and signed off. I love that sort of thing.
Yeah, excellent. So just finishing off then, get back to Stanley. I know it's what brings us together. So what are your expectations for this season, David?
Stay in the division. And, I think that, again, you've always got to have something to look forward to, and that would be to get in the playoffs. And that's what they're trying to achieve. Number one, stay in the division. And two, to get as near as possible to get into them promotion playoffs. It's unlucky when you get injuries the way that we've had, because if you haven't got a massive senior squad, you've got to have a senior squad with juniors coming through. But if you lose a couple of strikers, and that seems to have been the problem this summer, this season, that get the ball in the back of the net, and we've not been doing that. And if you leak a goal or two, you're on the wrong end. But the club looks fantastic. The stadium is something to be really proud of. And getting back to what we said right at the beginning, the experience, the customer experience, the supporter experience, win, lose or draw, we've had a great afternoon. And knowing this is so important, particularly in football, knowing that every one of them 11 or 14 or 15 that have played have worked their nuts off to get a result. And because you can see hell off if anybody's backpedaling. You can see it. I can see it.
Yeah, it just doesn't happen, does it? And
No.
John and Jimmy and the work ethic, they won't allow it, will they?
No, and to see lads like Keneally and McConville who are still doing it, they're still doing it in League One. That is terrific for them too. But other lads who've come into the team and done well with a chance of moving on, it's terrific to see. They play some good football. We're not a lump it up the middle. We try and play football.
No, definitely not. So no, thanks for that. I will. We'll see what happens this season. I'm sure we'll be in the division for next year. I'm quietly confident. You never know in football, but I think we're heading in the right direction as a team and a club, definitely. So thanks very much for Dave sharing your football life, and really enjoyed that chat as always.
Darren, thank you. It's been lovely. Do it again sometime.
We will do. Thanks very much. Cheers.